Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thank you so much for being here. Let's talk abortion, shall we? Because that's what this is all about. Now, the left was trying to make this election all about a referendum on Trump's handling of COVID. Now, I know we got, 42 more days, so there's still 42 more things that could happen, that could change everything. But I think as of now, the entire narrative has changed, and this is all going to be about the Supreme Court, and therefore all about abortion. Amy Coney Barrett, who's probably going to be Trump's nominee, she is a Catholic, pro-life mother of 7. All right. And so all the hatred that's going to be piled on her these next couple weeks is because she's a pro-life woman. So that's really what this is. So I think it's important here that we do a brief introduction of Roe v. Wade and what it really says and the history of it and how we got to where we are today. And then ideally, how it could in fact be overturned. So let's settle in. We're gonna do this for 2 segments here because there's a lot to go over. Let me say this before we get started. In the end, if/when, and I believe it will eventually, because it's on such shaky ground, and we'll get to that. When Roe v. Wade is overturned, it would simply put abortion laws to the states. Some states would outlaw completely, as was the case in Texas, which is what we'll get to, other than the life of the mother. And some states would allow it, like in California, it'd just be game on, right? It would go back to what it was in 1973. Some states would allow it, some states wouldn't. And I think it's really important to know that because a lot of people freaking out about it are acting as if when it's overturned, abortion will be illegal overnight for everyone. And no, that's not what will happen. It'll just be left up to the states. Okay, so there were 3 questions, actually, and it gets there's so many different levels we can do. There are actually 3 people involved with Roe v. Wade, but they dismissed 2 of them in the actual ruling. But there are 3 questions involved in Roe. It was the competing rights of the pregnant woman, the rights of her unborn child, and then the rights of the state of Texas. So we're going to ignore the state of Texas part here just because that gets a little complicated. So you have the rights of the pregnant woman and the rights of the unborn child. And the court ultimately ruled that the rights of the woman trumps all based on the woman's right to privacy. Oddly. The court decided that the right of a woman's privacy is of higher priority than the right of the unborn child. Right to privacy. That's weird. Have you ever heard that? You don't see pro-abortion people marching around we have a right to privacy, right to privacy. That's not a mantra of the Planned Parenthood pro-abortion people. What is that? What do you mean right to privacy? Where is that right to privacy? Where does that exist in the Constitution? What are we even talking about? The right to privacy. Okay, so we got to go back to Ulysses S. Grant. How about that? President 1869. At the time, there was something in New York City called the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice, which I believe we have the logo of, and that person on the right, I believe, is burning books. Now, I don't know much about the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice. I could do some separate research on that, but I'm sure maybe they did some good things, I guess, but they were also known for banning books and newspapers and plays, and they would block anything that had sex or obscene language. It was founded by this guy, Anthony Comstock. So there were laws known as Comstock laws. Anthony Comstock convinced Ulysses S. Grant to sign the Comstock Act, which banned and made it illegal to send certain things through the post office. So anything that was obscene or lewd, sex toys, anything with obscenity in it, anything related to abortion could not be sent through the post office. But the most relevant thing here is any contraceptions. So no contraceptions could be mailed. So the Comstock Act was passed in 1873, and a bunch of other states followed with their own state versions of them. Okay, so you with me so far? So we have the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice convinced Ulysses S. Grant to sign the Comstock Act, which banned the mailing of particular things, including contraception. And then different states passed their own version of this. So let me read this one part of it here. So this is the Comstock Act. These are the things that were banned through the mail. Every obscene, lewd, and filthy book, pamphlet, picture, paper, letter, writing, print, or other publication of an indecent character, and every article or thing designed, adapted, or intended for preventing conception or producing abortion. Any article, instrument, substance, drug, medicine, or thing may or can be used or applied for preventing conception or producing abortion. Okay? States passed their own versions of it. This is the 1880s or so. Every state got rid of those laws by about the 50s. By the 1950s, every state had gotten rid of their version of the Comstock laws, except for Massachusetts and Connecticut. And the first Planned Parenthood opened in Connecticut, 1935, as a direct challenge to their 1879 law, which prevented the use of any drug, medicinal article, or instrument for the purpose of preventing conception. So there's a specific law passed in 1879 in Connecticut that banned any drug, medicinal article, or instrument for the purpose of preventing conception. So Planned Parenthood opened up in Connecticut for that very reason. I believe contraception, in this context would have been a diaphragm or some other IUD. The pill was not invented until the 1950s and really prevalent in the 1960s. So 1879, there was the pill, right? So this Planned Parenthood, these activists of Planned Parenthood, they didn't like this law, right? So they kept trying to sue the state to overturn them, and it didn't work. And their cases never made it to the Supreme Court until Estelle Griswold. Do you read the picture of these two ladies? Estelle Griswold, she was the executive, that's the woman on the left. She was the executive director of the Planned Parenthood, what was it called? Planned Parenthood League of Connecticut, I think. And then the woman on the right is C. Lee Buxton. She was a Yale med school gynecologist. And those two ladies ran the Planned Parenthood in New Haven, Connecticut, which is where Yale is. They had a big event where they gave contraception to married couples. Now, this is super important to understand. Married couples. They gave, not abortion, they gave contraception to married couples. They were arrested and they were fined $100 for doing that. They sued, went up to the courts, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled, the case was called Griswold versus Connecticut. The Supreme Court ruled that that law in Connecticut is unconstitutional. The law that says married couples can't have, well, in this case, the law was just said people, but in this particular case, married couples can't I guess it would be, this Planned Parenthood can't participate in a crime that is married couples having contraception. And the Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional because it violates the right to marital privacy. Okay, I'll say it again, this is super important. The Supreme Court ruled in Griswold versus Connecticut, 1965, that the Constitution gives people the right of marital privacy. Now, this term marital privacy, this is the same concept that was used to justify, like 100 years prior, men being allowed to beat their wives. And the idea was that it's marital privacy, like a marriage bond is its own legal entity, and the courts, the law can't get involved because there's marital privacy. That's to be left up to the married couple itself. Now, obviously those laws changed, but that was the idea of marital privacy. And this idea was brought back again for this contraception debate. It's a married couple, and they have marital privacy when it comes to contraception. Now, you're wondering right now, where is this right to privacy in the Constitution? What are we talking about? So the justice who wrote the majority opinion said that that marital privacy was penumbrous and an emanation of other constitutional protections. Huh? Penumbrous? The heck is that? What's an emanation? Here's a penumbrous. Penumbras, definition. The partially shaded outer region of the shadow cast by an opaque object. That's a penumbra. In astronomy, it is the shadow cast by the Earth or moon over an area experiencing a partial eclipse. An emanation is an abstract but perceptible thing that issues or originates from a source, a tenuous substance or form of radiation given off by something. Okay, in other words, it doesn't exist. It's not there, it's not in the Constitution, right? And you can see, it's like they're saying, oh, well, the right to privacy, it's a penumbris, it's a partially shaded outer region of a shadow of an opaque object that's vague and tenuous and a form of radiation. It's like, what are you talking? That's not a thing. And they admitted that. Oh, it's a shadow cast by a partial eclipse, the outer opaque area right now. Come on, it's not in the Constitution. And that all but admits it right there. There's no marital privacy. It's not in the Constitution. So how did they get there? Fourth Amendment. That's how they got there. Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, or effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And here's the justice. This is Griswold versus Connecticut. Would we allow the police to search the sacred precincts of marital bedrooms for telltale signs of the use of contraceptives? The very idea is repulsive to the notions of privacy surrounding the marriage relationship. Okay. So this contraception law is overturned because a married couple has a right to marital privacy. That was 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut. All right, let me take a break here. We'll come back. That was 1965. We'll fast forward to 1973 because that Griswold versus Connecticut is the foundational base of Roe v. Wade. But they took a word out. I'll tell you about it next. We'll wrap it up. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back. We are running through the history of Roe v. Wade because that's what all of this is entirely about. So I want to make sure we have a good understanding of how we got where we are. So hope the last segment made sense. Let me put it in like 10 seconds. 1800s, there were these Comstock laws. Among other things, they banned contraception. Every state had their own. By the 1950s, they got rid of them, except for Connecticut and Massachusetts. Connecticut is where the first Planned Parenthood was, and they specifically went after this law that banned contraception use. That went up to the Supreme Court, Griswold versus Connecticut, 1965. It overturned the law and allowed contraception to be used by married couples. Married couples, and they based it off of this thing that doesn't exist in the Constitution called marital privacy. And the justice who wrote the opinion called it a penumbris of the Constitution. So it's the shadow of the Constitution. Because the Fourth Amendment protects against searches and seizures, therefore there's also this shadow thing called marital privacy. So it struck down that law. Cool. That was 1965. Fast forward 1972, there was a law that struck down a ban on contraceptions to single people. So hold on. I thought it was marital privacy. I thought the law was against married couples having contraception, and you based it off of marital privacy, but now contraception's for single people, so now it's just privacy. And it was the very next year, Roe v. Wade, 1973. The court used Griswold versus Connecticut as precedent for marital privacy, but they changed two pretty important things. Not only did they take out the word marital, and they just base it off of privacy, which isn't a thing, they also took contraception and changed it to abortion, which are very different things as well. One prevents a pregnancy, one ends a pregnancy. See the word game that they changed there? Did the old switcheroo? I mean, the Griswold case was on shaky constitutional ground itself. One of the dissenters of Griswold, he's like, listen, this law is very silly. The law that says I mean, there's only two. It was only Massachusetts and Connecticut at that point. All the other states got rid of those laws. So the guy's like, listen, the law is very silly, but there's no marital privacy in the Constitution. Like you can't strike it down based on this. So even that was on shaky constitutional ground. It got even shakier when they took the marital part out of it. But it totally is different when you're talking contraception with abortion. But that's what Roe v. Wade was based off of, Griswold versus Connecticut. This is in Roe v. Wade. This is the majority opinion. They throw a bone. They say, listen, the Constitution does not explicitly mention any right to privacy, right? You can see the guy, all right, fine. All right, we admit it doesn't explicitly mention, but in a line of decisions, however, the court has recognized that a right of personal privacy does exist under the Constitution. Did you see that? A right of personal privacy. That's Roe v. Wade. Back in Griswold, it was marital privacy. They took the word marital out. Roe says the right of privacy is broad enough to encompass a woman's decision whether or not to terminate her pregnancy. Gosh, you're like, how is privacy even connected? And in Roe v. Wade, it never really outlines that. It doesn't really talk about how privacy, I don't even know, like that didn't make any sense. Like what's the privacy part? So this is from Griswold. This is one of the dissenting justices in Griswold. The guy said, with all due deference, I can find no such general right of privacy in the Bill of Rights, in any other part of the Constitution, or in any case ever before decided by this court. I love it. The guy's like, what are you talking about? There's no right to privacy? What is it? And then it's just, now it's just game on, right? I mean, once you've taken marital privacy to be privacy and to take it from contraception to abortion, I mean, it's like, what's gonna stop you now, right? So just one more example of how words have been changed. Roe v. Wade, there's another case decided at the same time. It was called Doe v. Bolton. And it talked about health. So the original Texas law that was at the center of Roe v. Wade, it said you can't have an abortion unless it's to save the life of the mother. That got changed to protect the health of the mother. And then health in Doe v. Bolton was defined as the physical, emotional, psychological, and familial health. So like anything, right? And notice that still today, pro-abortion people, they'll talk about health of the mother. But if you get them to define that, I mean, it's just anything. They don't say life of the mother, they say health of the mother now, very, very specifically. I'll never forget, a couple years ago, we talked to, what's his name, Dr. Levitino, maybe? He was a former abortion doctor, and now he's pro-life. And he told me the story of he once performed an abortion on a girl because she wanted to look good in her prom dress. And he justified that by checking the box that it was for her emotional health. Just as an example of how broad that can be. Roe v. Wade, and I don't know, maybe tomorrow we can go into some details of the Roe v. Wade decision. It's pretty quick. It's like you can read it in like 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. A pretty quick decision. We can go to some highlights and lowlights of it. But it was 47 years ago. It's 1973. A lot's changed. One of the co-founders of NARAL, remember we played the clip of this guy. He ran the largest, NARAL is one of the big pro-abortion groups. He, at the time, ran the largest abortion center in the country. And he became pro-life after he saw an ultrasound. 1973 was before ultrasound. Ultrasound was invented before this, but it wasn't wasn't widespread at all. It was barely ever used by then. So that's different. There's also 47 years of science of when life truly begins. That was not taken into account on Roe v. Wade. And I'll say it again, it's just a matter of common sense. If life doesn't begin at conception, when else could it begin? What other magical moment in those 9 months would you say life does begin, if not at the very beginning? When does a soul enter a body? At the arbitrary second trimester right? And a trimester is only even a thing because a pregnancy happens to be 9 months long, and you can easily divide that by 3-month increments. But it's not like a medical thing, right? There's no difference between a baby at 2 months and 30 days and 3 months and 1 day, right? It's not like not a baby, boom, baby. Or do you have to tell me when that day is? What is that moment when it's, oh, now it's a baby? You can't do that. It's entirely arbitrary whenever you decide that is. And that's, you're just making it up. It's a baby the entire time. If not the moment of conception, then when? All right, so that's enough of that for now. The question is, how would this be overturned? So there's one school of thought out there that this could be overturned based on the definition of person, particularly in the 14th Amendment. But it's tricky because the 14th Amendment was specifically about freeing slaves, but it has the word persons in it. So what is the definition of the word persons? And is an unborn child a person? So anyway, we'll talk about that for another, but that's how that would be overturned probably, is how we define a person. But just know that, and then it would be brought to the states, and the states would decide ultimately. So just know that nationwide, this right to an abortion is based on a very, very shaky ground of privacy. And that can't last for long. And I have a feeling that Amy Coney Barrett might have a thought or two about it. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Staters. There's one quote from Roe v. Wade that I missed, and I got to throw it in here. Sorry. It was pivotal, and it would have made that last segment way better. Come on. I blew it. This is from Roe v. Wade. In support of this, they, the pro-life people, outline at length and in detail the well-known facts of fetal development. And again, this was in 1973, way before we had any concept of fetal development, truly, or we didn't know anything compared to what we know today. And there's a whole other segment we can do about that, which is super fascinating. But anyway, if this suggestion of personhood is established, the appellant's case, that's the person who wanted the abortion, the appellant's case, of course, collapses. Wow, right? So there it is. So if, that was 1973, 47 years have gone by, and we know a lot more than we knew then to establish personhood. And they admit in Roe v. Wade that the case would collapse if one could do that. So anyway, all right, changing gears here, sort of, although connected. David French. So David French is a conservative guy, pretty sure a never Trumper, if I'm right. I didn't read it yet, but yesterday he wrote this whole thing about how, my understanding is the gist of it is the Republicans should not nominate a justice now in exchange for a pledge by future President Biden to not pack the court. Which is the most ridiculous thing. Like, what are you talking, a pledge? I like Jesse Kelly's point. Let me pull up Jesse Kelly's. If you don't follow Jesse Kelly on Twitter, I don't know what you're doing on Twitter. Like, what else could possibly be on Twitter other than following Jesse Kelly? Okay, this is what he wrote in response to David French. I too have a proposal. We nominate the most fire-breathing conservative we can find and put them on the court. Then, after the election, we pack the court with 10 more fire-breathing conservatives who spend the next 4 years overturning 100 years of unconstitutional law. As you think about it, you hear the left talk about packing the court. I'm thinking, why don't we just pack the court? Well, why don't we just put 20 more people on the court now? Like, you just pack the court? What is this ridiculous? And David French is like, oh, let's just get a pledge. We need a pledge from Biden that he won't pack it, and then we won't put a judge. Like, get out of here. Anyway, he's got a new book out. I hope to talk to him this week on the air. Just don't show him this segment, if you don't mind. Because I do like David French. But he wrote this article called Yes, America Could Split Apart, and it's the theme of his book. And his opening line of this article was, I can't remember the exact moment when I first began to fear for the future of our nation. And I'd just like to be very clear, as a history observer, enthusiast, history lover, of course our nation will come apart eventually. That's what nations do. No nation has survived long. Sure, land masses with people on them have existed for a long time, right? Like Iran. People will be like, oh, Iran's lasted for thousands of years. No, it hasn't. I mean, you had like people in this land mass that we currently call Iran, but the Persian Empire and Iran, like those are different things, right? A country with a stable government, that doesn't last for a long time. And the Bible is full of this, There are 5 different kinds of wraths of God. I didn't think, geez, Slater, where are you going with this? Roll with me here. There's 5 different kinds of God's wrath. You have eternal wrath. You go to hell. Eschatological wrath. That's the end of the world. Cataclysmic wrath. That's like a natural disaster. Consequential wrath. That's you reap what you sow. And there's also the wrath of abandonment. The wrath of abandonment. And this is hard for people to accept and for people to hear, but the Bible is full of it. And I just got a couple examples right here. We'll start with Judges 10. You have forsaken me and served other gods. Therefore, I will deliver you no more. Go and cry out to the gods which you have chosen. Let them deliver you in the time of your distress. Proverbs 1:24. Because I called and you refused, I stretched out my hand and no one paid attention, and you neglected all my counsel and did not want my reproof. I will also laugh at your calamity, will mock when your dread comes. When your dread comes like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come on you. Then they will call on me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they shall not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would not accept my counsel. They spurned all my reproof. So they shall eat of the fruit of their own way and be satiated with their own devices. And you're thinking, all right, Slater, that's an Old Testament thing. This is Paul, Acts 14:16. In the generations gone by, he, God, permitted all the nations to go their own way. Not a good way. Romans 1:21, this is the key. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. Okay, so what happened then? Verse 24, therefore God gave them over in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. Verse 26, for this reason God gave them over to degrading passion. Verse 28, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do these things which are not proper. And then he lists them. And as I list these, think if we have them today. Being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. Goes on. And then not only that, but also gives hearty approval to those who practice these things. Okay, my point here is 3 times in that verse, it says God gave them over in Romans. God gave them over. And it's a digression, right? So it starts off with God giving us over to our lusts. And then it goes to God giving us over to our degrading passions. And even worse after that, it's God giving us over to our depraved mind. I'll throw this in here just because this is the big issue of the election now. And we just talked about it for the last half hour. Abortion. That's abortion. So depraved, if you look at the etymology of depraved, there's a ton there. And if you look at the original Greek word, there's a lot to it too. But the nicest root for the word depraved, the nicest etymology is distort, to distort. There's like way more and more appropriate even here, but I'm just trying to be generous with this point. Depraved means to distort, and nothing could be more distorted than a man who is designed to protect and a woman who is designed to nurture, killing a human life in her womb. Like that is the single most distorted, unnatural thing that is possibly conceivable. That is a distorted mind. And our society is fighting tooth and nail for it. Okay. The wrath of abandonment. So back to our country breaking up. Don't get too worried about it. Just know it's inevitable. Listen, I love America as much as the next guy. I don't want this to happen. But it's inevitable, especially when God has given us over to our sin. It's just a matter of how long we can hang on. Now, I don't want to be doomsday here. It could be, I don't think it'll be this election. This isn't it. We're not even close. It's one of those things, and maybe it sounds like if you listen to the show, you're like, geez, Slater thinks we're going to have a civil war tomorrow. No. I think we got a ways to go before things really pop off in a bad way. But we're talking about America splitting up. I mean, again, that's what countries do. That's not. We've done it twice. How about that? Right? We're talking like this, hypothetical, wow, maybe. No, never will America split up. We've done it twice, right? Our colonists, we were the colony. We broke away from America. We were one country at one point. And then the Civil War. We already had a Civil War. So of course, yeah. Oh, you think we've advanced so much? Ah, yes, we humans have changed so much in the last 150 years. It was only 150 years ago. So I don't know, when's the next time we break up, or when does America cease to exist as we know it? I don't know, could be 100 years from now. Could be 1,000 years from now. But even then, we're just a blink of an eye. My wife was reading something out of Exodus the other day, and she was telling me, she's like, it's amazing. There was one line in Exodus, and then there was another line. And in between that was 400 years. 400 years of history, just totally, and the Bible's full of a people or a nation or a person, maybe, and it's just one little mention. But even that's huge. Because think of all the people, certainly, but even nations and periods of hundreds of years that they're just So when the history of the world is written, when the world's over, America may never get a mention. I mean, that's just how what of a blink of an eye we really are. I think that's humbling and important to think about. So again, David French, what was the line? I can't remember the exact moment when I first began to fear for the future of our nation. I don't know, how about the first time you've ever opened up a history book? All right, I want to come back. Yeah, we have time. I want to talk about the 5. By the way, there's a clock right there. If you ever watch the show and you wonder why I look over there, there's a clock. That's what the clock. I want to talk about the 5 biggest lies in our country today. The 5 biggest lies. And then we'll tell the truth of them too. What's up next? True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, thanks for being here. There are 5 dominant lies that exist in our culture today, and I, at one point, believed every single one of them. So let's talk about it, and then we'll talk about the truth. First, life is random. That's one of the main lies in our country, that life is random. Evolution pushes this, right? Big Bang, so something came from nothing. So at one point there was nothing, and then all of a sudden, somehow something came out of it just randomly. No one has ever explained that one properly. And then not only that, but you have the universe, and then somehow the Earth was formed randomly out of just things like gases colliding. And then somehow an amoeba was formed, a living thing. And then somehow with atoms colliding over billions of years, the amoeba somehow turned into a fish, and the fish turned into a frog, and the frog turned into a bird, and the bird turned into a monkey, and the monkey turned into a human. So and then consciousness somehow came out of nowhere too. So just atoms colliding randomly over billions and billions of years created life. Okay, that's evolution, right? There's no creator, and there's no purpose. We're just randomness. The president of PETA back in 1989 said animal liberationists do not separate out the human animal. A rat is a pig, is a dog, is a boy. They're all mammals. So to that view of life, we're all just random mutations of equal value, right? So like atoms just kept colliding and mutating, and then like one track went off and made a dog, and then one track went off and made a pig, and one track went off and made a human, and we're all the same. It's all just random. It's absurd. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. That is it is the single most ridiculous thing I could possibly fathom. But we'll save all that for another day. Second biggest lie. I am militantly anti-evolution, by the way. Just in case that's not clear. After much study and contemplation. I used to I used to have like this like middle ground kind of thing, but no, it's total garbage. Anyway, and they know it too. That's the thing. These evolution people, if you get them behind closed doors and when they're talking to each other, they know it's nonsense. They know it's ridiculous. They just won't tell you. Okay. Second biggest lie. Truth is relative. There's no absolutes. There's no standards. Who are you to say? Third biggest lie is that people are basically good. Don't even get me started on that one. Lie number 4 is that everyone can change their own life. Just everyone can get control, and you can be the person that you want to be. You just got to try harder, do more, and you just buy this self-help program, and you too can be, right? Allie Beth Stuckey, talked to her a couple weeks ago. She has her new book called You're Not Enough, and That's Okay. It is excellent. It is a wonderful, wonderful book, and you should definitely buy it. And it's all about this. It's all about how this self-help stuff is total garbage. And then the fifth biggest lie is the purpose of life is self-satisfaction. That you need to always feel good about yourself. Life is about constant happiness. And you can see how that's mutated into, I'm proud. I'm proud. Right? The gay rights movement is literally called pride. It's just ridiculous. I'm proud of who I am. Take it or leave it. This is who I am. And I'm not just saying gay rights, it's that, but it's everything. It's like I'm, people do like, it could be something as benign as I'm late. I'm just late. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. I'm late. Or it could just be like, I'm a jerk. Yep, I'm just a jerk to people. I'm just a big, loud jerk. That's who I am. Take it or leave it. So those are the 5 lies. Life is random. Truth is relative. People are basically good. Everybody can change their own life if you choose to, and that you should just be happy all the time. And the goal and purpose of life is self-satisfaction. So the truth of those is the opposite of all of them. Now, what I'm going to do here is briefly provide the Christian outline here. You can do whatever you want. You can believe whatever you want, obviously, free country. But if nothing else, even if you're not a Christian, please just acknowledge and notice how the modern ethic today is completely the opposite of the Bible. Completely the opposite. 5 major worldview issues. The pop culture view is the diametric opposite of the Christian ethic. And my point I want to make above all else is purposefully so. Purposefully so. And I'll explain that in a second. But here it is. So in Christianity, and also consider this when Amy Barrett is nominated and the anti-Catholic bigotry will be just pouring through your television screen. So the opposite of these things. God is sovereign. Nothing is random. The Bible is absolute truth. All people are basically sinful. Only Christ can change your life. And the purpose of life is the selfless submission to Jesus. Each point is the exact opposite. So where God is sovereign and nothing is random, the atheists and whoever else came out and said, no, everything's random. Where the people said the Bible is truth, people came after that now and said, no, there is no truth. Where the Bible says people are sinful, they came in purposefully and said, no, everyone's great. Everyone's born good, everyone's great. Where the Bible says only Christ can change your life, people came in and said, no, you can change your life. And where the Bible says selfless submission to Jesus is the goal of life, that may not make you happy. So they came in and said, no, the purpose of life is to be selfish. Exact opposite. And nothing new either, right? The start of the last segment, start of this whole thing is this idea that America won't last forever. This is nothing new, and nations have collapsed because of it. This is out of Isaiah. Your wisdom and your knowledge is 700 BC. It's a long time ago. Your wisdom and your knowledge have deluded you, for you have said in your heart, I am, and there's no one besides me. That is the modern mantra. I am, and there's no one beside me. That's the Invictus poem, right? Nelson Mandela made that poem famous. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. No, you're not. All right, I'll end this sermon here. One last thing. This is Psalm 81. So how do we do better? I gave them over to, this is what I say, Psalm 81. I gave them over to the stubbornness of their hearts, to walk in their own devices. Very similar to what we were talking about in the last segment. Oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. If they do, I would quickly subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their adversaries. Verse 16, and I would feed you with the finest of the wheat, and with honey from the rock I would satisfy you. Walk in my ways. Listen to me, walk in my ways. That's how you get back on track. So, back to America. This is David French. At this moment in history, there's not a single important cultural, political, religious, or social force that is pulling Americans together more than it is pushing us apart. And therefore, and that's true. And therefore, we cannot assume that a continent-sized, multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy can remain united forever. And it will not remain united if our political class cannot and will not adapt to an increasingly diverse and divided American public. So David French's argument is that in 1776 and 1861, we were geographically concentrated and like-minded, right? Like the different sides, whether in 1776 it was the colonists were geographically isolated from the mother country and like-minded, and also the North and the South, geographically isolated and like-minded. When each group feels that their culture is under threat, they will each determine, or at least one, but they will determine that the existing union cannot last. That's the argument. Geographically isolated, like-minded, cultures under attack. That's the prerequisite, if you will. So the question is, are we geographically concentrated? Yes. Maybe not as clear. Well, there's always going to be overlap, right? I mean, Ulysses S. Grant, talked about him in the first segment. One of his neighbors, I think in Ohio, were these people from the South, and they moved up there because they were so vehemently against slavery, they couldn't even, the family didn't want to raise their kids in a slave area, so they moved up to Ohio. So there's always going to be some overlap, right? There's always going to be liberals in Texas and conservatives in California, right? But generally, are we geographically concentrated? Yeah, red and blue states are very different. They're very different culturally. They watch different TV shows. They watch entirely different sports. David French used to live in the Deep South, and then he moved to New York City. And he said it still amazes him that there's people in this country who don't know Nick Saban. Right? Like he grew up in the South, or he lived in the South, and like Nick Saban, I mean, you either have a painting of Nick Saban above your fireplace, like he's either God or he's the devil, but you know Nick Saban, but most of the country has never heard of him. And then even the NFL. NFL used to be our one uniting cultural entity, and now that's gone. Let me give you some numbers here. So there's 36 states where the governor, the state assembly, and the state senate are all controlled by one party. So in Tennessee, for instance, Republican governor, Republican state assembly, Republican state senate. California, where I live, Democrat governor, Democrat state assembly, Democrat state senate, right? There's only one state, Minnesota, that has a divided legislature, where one of them is controlled by Republicans and one's controlled by the Democrats. That means 80% of our country's population lives under one-party rule. 80% already. Throw on top of that human nature, and it turns out when like-minded people get together, they individually and as a group end up taking the more extreme position on that thing. So if a bunch of gun people get together, they end up being more pro-gun. If a bunch of pro-abortion people get together, they end up being more pro-abortion, more extreme in their position. So the more like-minded people get together, the more extreme they get. Interesting. I gotta go. So what do we do? First, this idea of the breakup of the country, just know it's inevitable. And I'm not saying it's tomorrow. I'm not saying it's 2016. It won't be. But it will happen. It's inevitable. How do we hold it off? Well, Lincoln said, we must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. Okay, well, how do we not break it? Well, Micah 6:8 says, he has told you, man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? I'm not sure how much of that we're going to see in the next few months. True story. Thanks, Slater. See you tomorrow.